Hey everybody, so today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the lessons that I've learned over the last couple weeks on the homestead. And the biggest one I've actually learned is to never say never. In 2014, when my husband and I started homesteading, I remember seeing some, books or something that he was reading, and the pictures of the wives and everything like that, and nothing against the women whatsoever, but they're in plaid and they weren't fashionable and all this other stuff. And I basically said to my husband back then, I'm never going to be one of those homesteady farming wives. You're never going to catch me in plaid with super high-waisted pants and blah 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 blah. I was at the time in 2014 really into fashion and makeup and this, that, and the other thing. And not that I don't like those things now, but there's a time and place for everything. I don't need to have makeup on 24/7. And back in 2014, I liked wearing makeup basically 24/7. I was a bit more of a princess. And so I remember saying that to my husband. Well, back then, I had no idea what 2021 was going to have in store for us. I had no idea what, the last few years would have in store for us, period. But definitely not this year, because now my husband actually travels some for his job. And so recently he was gone for 2 weeks. And we're in basically a partially off-grid homestead. And so not only am I doing the off-grid stuff, I'm also taking care of the animals, I'm taking care of the children, homeschooling, upkeeping the property. I planted I want to say 30, 35 trees that we had brought up from Florida in the last 2 weeks. And then I was, we do rotational grazing, so I'm moving the sheep every couple of days to new paddocks around the property and knee-high grass and everything else. So it's one of those moments, one of the days that I was moving the sheep actually, and I was like, man, I bet when I said that back in 2014, God got a really good laugh because here I am now. I still don't really wear plaid, but I was out in a sweatshirt and my work boots and jeans and everything else, and beanie because it was cold. Not the picture of fashion that I always had planned for myself back in 2014. And it's one of those things where there's a lot of things that my husband has mentioned to me about things he would want to do or things he would like to do. And God bless him for putting up with me sometimes, because I can be super stubborn. And there's been multiple times I told him there's things that I was never going to do. And here I am doing them. I was never going to live in a camper again. We did that when I was pregnant with our oldest daughter. Kind of a bad experience, but it was an old nasty camper. But, here we are living in a camper again, and I'm happy in a camper. Do I want a house? Absolutely. But I know that will come with time. So I'm perfectly happy right now living in a camper. And so it's one of those things where I said I'd never live in a camper again. I'm living in a camper again. I said that I wasn't going to be one of those farming, homesteading wives that takes care of the animals all the time and is just out in the field. And here I was doing that for 2 weeks, and I was loving it. I don't know if I never said I'd live in Oklahoma. I know I was really what? When my husband said it, I was not necessarily for living in Oklahoma when he mentioned it. But then I came around to the idea, and actually, I absolutely love Oklahoma. And the most recent one is, for years and years and years, my husband has been talking about our future home, whenever we had a permanent home, being basically what's called a wafati. And a wafati is I guess you could kind of say an underground house or earth integrated house. That's actually probably a better way to put it, earth integrated house. And so if you Google wafati, you'll see mostly it's, articles from Paul Wheaton with Permies and things like that. And then there's Mike Ayler, which he does the $50 and up underground houses. And it was something that when my husband brought this up to me, I want to say 2018 or so, 2017 maybe, I shot him down hardcore. I was not going to live in some house that had a dirt roof or something like that. And to be completely honest, now there's a lot of research you got to do to really understand where this is coming from. And this is not the video where I'm going to go into all that. But ironically enough, I said I would never live in one of those. And right now, I actually texted him when he was out of town just last week and told him, you know what? I think our thin grade house is the way we're going to go. And a lot of that has to do with, one, building costs currently of conventional housing. But also, too, living out in tornado country, basically, living in Oklahoma. While I am not afraid of tornadoes, we come from Florida, can't be really afraid of big weather events when you live in Florida. But I'm not afraid of tornadoes, but I absolutely respect them 100%. And everything that went on in Kentucky, and seeing the devastation that's there, it definitely made me start thinking a little bit more about what can we live in that's a little bit safer, I guess, than conventional building as well too. And basically the premise behind like a wafati is it helps to heat your house in the winter and cool your house in the summer naturally without having to use necessarily like heater and AC. And then also, it can be fireproof and this, that, and the other thing. But they have a lot of windows. And like I said, I'm not going to get into the whole wafati thing. You can Google it, Paul Wheaton wafatis, pretty easy to find. But they're actually very viable. And when I texted my husband that, I, joked around and told him, like, I know I said I'd never do this, but, and as he joked with me, he always does, that he's like, I just had to plant the seed. He's like, I knew you'd come around to it eventually. And that is one thing I do love about my husband. He doesn't try to force me into doing anything because he knows I won't do something if he's trying to force me to do it. But he also knows that I know that he has good ideas. I just have to come around to them. We work together. So it's one of those things where over the last couple weeks while my husband was gone, there was a lot of things that I was kind of learning and coming to an understanding with God about. And then also really things that I started thinking about is, obviously like living structures and, how to best, protect our family in situations like wind events. We also live out in the middle of nowhere. I honestly, when my husband and I were talking about it, I couldn't even think of the nearest fire station. And then we were driving through one of the towns nearby. I'm like, oh, okay, there's the nearest fire station the other day. And I didn't even know where the nearest fire station was. And even out here, our house is, wherever we build our house is going to be a minimum a quarter of a mile from the road. The thing's just going to burn. If it burns, it's going to burn, and we do have forest behind us quite a bit. There's a lot of properties that are half wooded here. So the likelihood of a forest fire, it's something that could happen. So when it came to thinking about building over the last couple weeks, and just something that had been popping in my mind while I was taking care of the sheep, something I said I would never do, I thought about the fact that we need something that's fairly fireproof and fairly windproof and all this other proof type things that I wanted for safety for our family. And it's just interesting. It's one of those things where there's a lot of things over the last few years that I said I would never do. And now that it's actually come down to trying to implement different things, that I realize, probably a good idea to do those things. Probably a good idea to listen to my husband. But at the same time, it's one of those things too, like with the sheep, I just think about the fact that I wrote on my Instagram about how being out here, when I got out of college, I got my degree in journalism. I was planning on being some hotshot reporter for some news agency. And here I am living out in the middle of nowhere, writing faith-based books and doing homestead vlogs. Not necessarily what I had planned at all, but it's what God had planned, and it's much better than what I had planned. And it's one of those things that I'm realizing that, there's so much bigger things out there that God has planned for myself, my husband, my family, than what I did. And also realizing my husband's right way more than I like to give him credit for. But it's one of those things that it's really cool to see how God is working in our family and how he's working specifically in my personal life. Because I realized without a shadow of doubt, he knows me way better than I ever knew myself. And it's one of those things that I have to realize that I can't be saying never. I have to stop saying I'm never going to do something, because none of the stuff like my husband has ever mentioned to me would have ever put me in any physical harm whatsoever. And so for me to say I'm never going to do that is very closed-minded. And I have to understand that I need to be more open-minded to things just in general anyways. And so to say I'm never going to do something if I know it necessarily won't cause me any physical harm is kind of ridiculous, because I haven't even opened up my mind to the possibilities of what that could provide for myself, for my family, and things like that. So it's just something I've been thinking about, guys. Never say never, I mean, just be open to what God has planned for you. Be open to where he wants to take you and what he wants to do with you. And for the ladies out there, if your husband's mentioning some weird alternative oddball housing thing or whatever, just, take it with a grain of salt and pray on it and see if your husband's going down the right path. But it's just been a really cool couple of weeks out here on the homestead. It was pretty cool to be able to do it on my own. Do I want to do it on my own ever again or for the rest of my life? Absolutely not. I want my husband here. But it was nice to know that I could do it when the time arises, so my husband can travel for work. And so it was just a cool couple of weeks. But yeah, guys, never say never. Keep yourself open to different opportunities and different possibilities, and be willing to move and do what God calls you to do, and it'll be good. All right. Hope y'all have a great day. Bye.